All right, everybody. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, yesterday or the day before yesterday, we were doing and continuing Tafseer Surah Al-An'am. And in regards to Surah Al-An'am, of course, we were talking about one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the founder of place. So we're talking about place, we're talking about space, we're talking about matter, we're talking about what comes out of matter. We're also talking about the human beings and their creation. So from this vast space to the small person, at least, or even definitely there are things that are even smaller, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَا تُبْصِرُونَ وَمَا لَا تُبْصِرُونَ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make oaths by the things that we could see and the things that we can't see. So whether we're speaking about that you can't see, whether it is considered as metaphysics, beyond physics and beyond matter, or whether we're speaking about what you cannot see with your naked eye. Okay. We also talked about فَقَدْ كَذَّبُوا بِالْحَقِّ لَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ فَسَوْفَ يَأْتِيهِمْ أَنْبَاءُ مَا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. So yes, definitely the ayat are laying out some of the things to look into the universe, to understand Allah, to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence. But still, you will see that many will still deny the signs and definitely the apparent signs, and will still choose to be mu'ridin, to be silent, to be mute, to be deafened, to not relate to the different signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether that was in faith or whether that was in action. So just keep that one in mind, because when we speak about in faith and in action, they have to be related to one another, because what your vision is in regards to this universe, in regards to your life, in regards to the purpose of your creation, in regards to what you consider as one, justice, two, truth, principle, etc., then that takes us to the second piece of it, which is, well, what really are you applying of that? So you recognize this is the truth. What's actually coming out of this recognition, out of this testimony, out of this faith that you have, which is, of course, al-i'rad. Like we said, al-i'rad can be in faith, and al-i'rad basically is to mean to turn your back, and we talked about the back part, whether there's no, of course, hearing in it, there's no seeing, but certainly there's something that you could feel, but certainly the feeling, or at least the sensation, for example, on your lips, on your eyes. And notice that we're speaking about the most sensitive parts in the body are actually the most dangerous areas that will have an effect on you on your heart. All right, just look at those sensitive areas. You count your sensitive areas and you will see that those are the areas that Islam regarded as, let's call it, crucial areas, sensitive areas that you have to take lots of caution, not in hygiene alone, and certainly not in their health alone, but also in taking that consideration to preserve what comes out of that in relationship to the universe. Let me connect you with something really interesting. Ibn al-Qayyim, when I read this, it just rang a bell. So Ibn al-Qayyim, just an idea about Ibn al-Qayyim. Ibn al-Qayyim, when you read his books, you could definitely see some mystical / Sufi influences in his writings. It's always present. It's always there. You feel it. And Ibn al-Qayyim, it's quite interesting. He was writing, I can't remember which book it was, but he was actually talking about that the most sensitive areas on a person's body are actually the areas that have the biggest influence on the inside of the person, whether it's on their heart, on their mind, or even on their spirituality. So if it's your lips, you do the dhikr with it, it's going to affect you spiritually. If you're talking about other things that are haram, it's going to affect you in basically distancing you from your spirituality. Same thing if you're talking about your ears, sensitive thing, and if that's why you could see the real part of the ear is actually way inside. The eyes, very sensitive. The private part, very sensitive area. And of course, certainly the abdomen, and you could see, those sensitive parts in the body are basically those areas that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always telling us to be mindful of how it's used, how we maintain it, and certainly how we put it in continuous, at least, let's say, the right function in order to bring about the right relationship, not only within, but also with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this is extremely important to keep in mind. Okay, and when we speak about al-i'rad, like we said, is not only in aqidah, but is also in putting things into action, whether putting your mouth into action, whether putting your eyes into action, whether, hey, you making that intention to go into action in what you do in regards to this action that is making that relationship between you, the world around you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course, certainly what is within you. We usually focus on what's outside, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, no, I want you to focus on what's inside. That's why there's a hadith Qudusi that the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your images, does not look at your appearances, but looks at your heart. Looks at your heart, because we usually focus on the appearance, whether we're speaking about makeup, the eyebrows and the lips and the face and hair, and trying to put a foundation and trying to get these Sephora products and all these different things, and without us realizing that it's absorbing our focus, it's redirecting our focus from looking within to looking outside. Well, certainly, inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful and loves beauty, but not at the expense of getting pacified away from looking at the beauty within. فَقَدْ كَذَّبُوا بِالْحَقِّ. And they had denied the truth. So they had when you look at the word, there is a difference between كَذَبُوا and between كَذَّبُوا. I want you to look at this one. Look at that shadda right there. So the shadda, which is this little upside down 3, okay, كَذَّبُوا بِالْحَقِّ, it tells us that, even though there are a couple qira'at, for example, for in Surah al-Naba, okay, كذابة, كذابة, okay, different qira'at for that word كذابة or كذابة or كذابة, okay. Now, same thing when we're looking at كذبوا. Is it كذبوا or is it كذبوا? What's the difference? So كذبوا, فقد كذبوا and كذبوا. If I were to say كذبوا, that means they had lied in saying the truth. In other words, they created their own narrative, they created their own rhetoric, and it was far away from reality and far away from truth. But if I am to say كذبوا, then with this shadda comes in, 1, the repetition, 2, this gradual process, and 3, we're speaking about something that is intense. Okay, intense or exaggerated, but exaggerated is more of a hyperbole. Okay, but in Lugha Arabiya, not every hyperbole is necessarily considered as an exaggeration to mean something beyond the reality. but sometimes in Lugha Arabiya, there can be certain words that can use the exaggeration conjugation, but it's not to mean that it's far from truth, but it is to show intense and to show how something was actually intense. So when you look at كذبوا بالحق, it wasn't just one thing that happened, but it was a gradual process. And when we're speaking about a gradual process, it tells us that when we speak of people denying truth or people taking the wrong path, it doesn't just happen all at once. It actually becomes this gradual process and it gets the person away from the right path entirely. And this is important to keep in mind that in the beginning, sin or ma'asiyah in general, sin in the beginning, we normalize it and we would think of it as, hey, well, it's not a big deal. And then it becomes, well, the person trying it, then it becomes the environment that they had normalized themselves with. And then later on, it becomes who they are. And then little by little, this person is a completely different person from the person that was at one point speaking fiercely of perhaps the sin that we're talking about. So when we look at kadhab, we're speaking about recognizing, one, there's the gradual process. Two, kadhabu, there's that repetition. Why is that important to talk about? Because the repetitive behavior that a person does, so whether we're speaking about repetitive behavior in good or repetitive behavior in wronghood, it eventually has a bigger impact on the person. I mean, we don't need neuroscience necessarily to prove that because we already can see it. Even if you are some Indian, I don't know, person to cook on the street and with that food on the street or whatever it is, but then they've been doing it for such a long time that they had become such experts that they could do it like a machine really fast, and you would fail if you were to just do it once, and definitely you wouldn't be that professional and that fast in making whatever they're doing. Now when we're speaking about repetitive behavior and how it affects a person, we could see that even in salah or even in spirituality in Islam, there's always that repetitive behavior. And that repetitive behavior, and I actually have a lecture, it's called Mindfulness in Islam. And I basically in that lecture speak about the different methods that Islam uses or Islam directs and Islam instructs in order to redirect our mind, to redirect our heart, to redirect our spirituality from seeing, for example, pain, from seeing pain to making it as a gain, perhaps from seeing calamity as something that is beyond you, something that you fail in bringing a change into, to seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's going to make the change. So from seeing the power in yourself that, for example, you failed, you probably were not successful, to considering that, well, it's not necessarily my own self, my body or my brain or whatever potential you wanted to use in order to get to success. But it's that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that I would depend on. And if it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power, I would not have been capable of doing it. Or even if I fail, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the one that I would depend on, but I have to put in the effort. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the one to give me the effort to get to success. At the same time, you're looking at those areas. One, there's repetition as a method, repetition where it's repeating, for example, Ya Fattah, Ya Alim, or repeating certain du'as. There's two, using certain names to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, using certain names to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as if you're probably, let's say, struggling with poverty, Ya Razaq. If you're struggling to solve a question, Ya Fattah, Ya Alim. If you're struggling perhaps with your health, Allahumma anta shafi. So just connecting one with the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, two, repeating such names or repeating certain du'as or repeating certain words. They could be your own dhikr. And certainly number three, in order to help us redirect the focus, is the part to gaining that ilm, to gaining clarity in how you see the whole matter, from seeing that you are the center to seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center. So even if you probably get into some calamity, God forbid, that at the end Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will solve it for me. That's not the end of the world. It's not the end. Therefore, redirecting the focus from shifting you as the center of potential or others as the center of potential, even if that person, let's say an abusive person, you don't consider them as the center and therefore they're the place of authority, but you consider that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the place of authority, as the place of power. So you would redirect your focus on where the center is and consider that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center, and therefore He is the place of power. He is the place of victory. He is the place of provision. He is the place of life and death, and the list goes on and on. The fourth thing is redirecting the focus from looking at this life as a center to seeing the hereafter as the center. How do we redirect that? Well, whether it's with reading Quran, because the Quran is always redirecting your focus. This life that you're living is extremely temporary, so redirect your focus and look at the hereafter. Redirect your focus from looking at whatever probably calamity, failure, whatever you went through in this life. I don't want you thinking that this is the end, because this is the beginning and not the end. The end is in the akhirah. This life is the beginning, not the end. So therefore, redirecting the focus, and that's the mu'min, and the believer, where they would read the world differently. They would read their potentials differently. They would read their calamities. They would read their successes. They would read whatever provisions that they had got. They would recognize that, nope, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving it to me. I'm not the one that did this to himself or herself. That way that we can build within ourselves, one, the commitment, two, the courage, three, certainly there's no way that you can get the courage unless you actually live the satisfaction. You can't live that unless you embrace patience. You can't get to patience unless you take the time to recognize that there's no way to endure endure the pain unless you recognize why you're doing this. Why is it worth it? And that's when you would recognize whether it's justice or whether it's Jannah or whether it's principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring that Jannah closer to you. You're making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala content over you. So four things: justice or principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, two, sabr and patience, three, that is iffah, and four, that is courage. Okay, so when you're looking at كذبوا, so we talked about repetition, we talked about the gradual process, and we also talked about the exaggeration in something. So كذبوا, does that mean that in terms of exaggeration, does that mean that this is far from what they were doing? No. This isn't to mean that this is far from what they were doing, but this is to talk about the intensity, the intensity of their denial, and two, the repetitive denial and insisting on denying the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the truth. That in itself is to basically reflect that this is a magnificent thing that they are committing, or a grave thing that they are committing. Okay, so this isn't to say that's it, this is an exaggerated thing, but this is to say this is a grave sin that came as a result of a repetitive behavior, came as a result of being, of course, within that commitment of whatever they're acting in denial and so forth. لما جاءهم فسوف يأتيهم أنباء ما كانوا به يستهزئون. And certainly, so why does a person get into this? Let's look at this one. فقد كذبوا بالحق, and then فسوف يأتيهم أنباء ما كانوا به يستهزئون. So how did they get to this stage? So this ayah is basically bringing to our attention what is this repetitive behavior, or what is the beginning. Remember, there's a gradual process. So the gradual process led to a repetitive behavior, led to the fact that this behavior was that grave, or that dangerous, that they were behaving in. What did it start with? It started out with mockery. It started out with consider what is mockery. So when you're talking about ridiculing something or mocking something, you are not taking it seriously. So you somehow, whether it's smirking or whether it's giving some kind of a body gesture that you don't care about this, or whether istihza, whether the person was literally using derogatory words to somehow belittle and consider whatever the person is talking about as not a big deal and nothing to care about. So that's what we would call an istihza. And this is important to keep in mind, because mocking, for example, Quran, we know that that's a simple thing, straightforward kufr. Mocking perhaps maybe, the Prophet ﷺ, we know that one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that one, but we usually don't think of mocking salihin and pious people, or mu'mineen. We usually don't think of that as something that may lead to takdhib al-haq. And mocking different rituals, maybe the beard, maybe niqab, maybe hijab, maybe certain religious practices. You probably didn't know that that was a sunnah, but you thought it was weird. You probably didn't think it was a sunnah, and you started mocking the person that was, or at least the sisters that were practicing this in the masjid, thinking of it as this is weird, this is not acceptable. Let's say somebody maybe using siwak, and the person maybe mocking siwak, for example, something, it's just a small thing. All right. But it's important to just keep in mind, that takes me to the surah. We'll talk about it once we get to Surah At-Tawbah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described the munafiqeen, when they were mocking the mu'mineen, and they were just calling them that, oh, they're the ones that are always there for the food. They're always there when it comes to getting something like a booty, but then they don't show up when the matters are relating to probably fighting. They're just there for the food. They're there to basically just get the reward and the treat for something, but they would not show up when it's a serious matter. But they were mocking who? They were mocking the best out of the Sahaba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said in regards to that behavior, He called it that he had just committed kufr, even though they didn't mock Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't mock the Prophet ﷺ. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarded that the reason for their mockery of the mu'mineen isn't necessarily as a personal thing, but the reason for that is it's because it's a psychology of a kafir. It's a psychology of a munafiq. The munafiq, when they cannot get to a level probably of piety or a level of taqwa, so they don't want to feel bad that they cannot get to that level, so they will mock the salihin or mock whoever's probably doing a good job in whatever they're doing, and then they'll bring it as, well, look at that person. Since they cannot get to their level, they'll basically try using derogatory terms, condescending statements to somehow take the honor of that person down, and thinking that by taking that person's honor down, that they will be at equal levels with them, and that way they won't feel guilty to why they can't memorize Quran like them, to why she can't wear hijab like her. So let's use words like, for example, haram police. And that way, instead of feeling guilty that we're doing something wrong, we'll just use a different statement to describe these people and call them haram police, that they're the ones that are somehow be a place of mockery. Somehow they're coming in as haram police, boring. They're just wanting to direct us. They're probably just nothing but hypocrites themselves, etc. And that's al-istihza. Okay, this is important to keep in mind, because such mockery, whether we're speaking about calling them haram police or probably mocking that, yeah, most hijabi women are anyway such and such and such. What is that inferring? Inferring that Islam itself is the cause to why, for example, certain hijabis might have a wrong practice, etc. But it's trying to scrutinize certain sins that maybe those that would attend jama'ah, maybe those that would attend the masjid, maybe those that would attend the halaqah, or maybe those that are wearing niqab, etc., using them as a place of mockery in order to not feel guilty, in order to bring in this target, by targeting the believers, to bring out the target and to try to dishonor them. But the inference is you are considering, or that person is considering, that the reason for that is because they don't see that Islam is a place of power, or Islam is a place of honor, or Islam and practicing Islam is what actually brings elevation. So when you look at the foundation, how did they get to that level of a takdhib? The foundation was they were mocking Islam in the details, whether sha'ir, etc. And then later on, this became a repetitive behavior, and that's why yastahzi'un, it didn't say istahza'u in the past, but it was talking about yastahzi'un. In other words, it was a continuous act. It was on, and then that actually led to the major behavior, which is takdhib al-haq. Let's flip that. Flipping that would basically mean that whatever good that you might do, it could be, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تحقرن من المعروف شيئا ولو أن تلقاه بوجه طلق. ولو أن تلقاه بوجه طلق. What does that mean? He said, don't belittle any good action, and don't belittle any good deed, no matter, in other words, no matter how small it is, that is. Even if you would meet your Muslim brother, and we're here, of course, sisters, so Muslim sister, okay, and just give a smile. Say, don't have much to give you, but I'll just give a smile. I'll just share a smile. Of course, this is not a sister doing to a brother, because that's going to mean something else, and most guys would understand it differently, okay? But just keep in mind that even if it's just a smile you would give a sister, even if it's probably just sharing maybe a piece of help, or maybe just a kind word, kind gesture, etc. لا تحقرن من المعروف شيئا. Even if it's so small, when you see other people doing it and thinking that's not a big deal, what's the big idea? Okay. And other people might actually see it as, oh, come on, don't exaggerate. Oh, well, or even making fun of that person. They are doing a good deed. Don't consider it that, oh, you think that's going to take you to Jannah now? Seriously? So you sharing some bread with that homeless person, you think you're going to take, that's going to take you to Jannah? You already know you're actually a sinner. You already know that you're on drugs, or you already know you're doing all these big harams. There's no way that that's going to take you to Jannah. And that is extremely dangerous. You know, there is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, you know, this Sahabi was an alcoholic. I know it kind of sounds weird to think of a Sahabi being an alcoholic. That was Abu Muhjan al-Thaqafi. Abu Muhjan al-Thaqafi was not only an alcoholic, he was so addicted to it that even after getting lashed, he'll just go and continue drinking. That's it. It was something that he just couldn't stop. Okay. Some Sahaba, they mocked Abu Muhjan al-Thaqafi. And they said, you know, even all the attempts to get him to quit, all the hitting that he got, or the corporal punishment and the flogging that he got, and he still would not stop. Didn't he yet learn a lesson? But the Prophet ﷺ forbid them, and he said, don't support shaitan on your brother. Now, this is important. Don't support shaitan on your brother. What does that mean? That sometimes someone is struggling to probably pray or probably do the right thing. Don't mock the good thing that they are doing, or support shaitan in different ways, and perhaps mocking him as, look at him. He can't even stop. Look at him. What were they doing? They were mocking him to probably go another step farther, probably leave the religion entirely. So we have to recognize that there has to be wisdom and etiquette in the way you invite others to the religion, in the way you comment on certain behavior, etc. At the end, your duty is to bring in al-khair within that person, to encourage them and not support shaitan on that person. Okay. أَلَمْ يَرَوْا كَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Had they not seen?
Excuse me.
Yep, go ahead, dear.
Can I ask a question before we finish?
Yep.
Number 5. يستهزئون. الاستهزاء, is it like kind of إيذاء, hurt, harm?
Well, there's right, but الإيذاء is different than الاستهزاء, but definitely الاستهزاء فيه إيذاء.
معنوي, like I remember
Absolutely.
من آذى لي وليا.
Right. من عاد, that one is not من آذى لي, من عاد لي وليا.
Okay, خلاص.
Okay. So من عاد لي وليا is different. It's
not
basically
من آذى.
No, not من آذى.
No, another hadith was آذى.
I'll have to search if there is another riwayah, to be honest. There could be, but right now I don't really have it on mind, but man aada li waliyan, and there could be another report with another narration, man aada li waliyan.
Maybe I mix between man aza zimmiyan and man aada. Yeah, maybe.
I would have to search the other one, but anyhow, so when you're looking at al-idha is different than al-istihza. Let me write that too, okay? And even though they may overlap in certain ways. So al-idha, okay, and al-istihza, okay? So al-idha is more general. is more comprehensive because that's inflicting harm, that's inflicting pain. Okay. الاستهزاء is mockery. So if you're talking about mockery, that's one type of harm that you could do to the person. Whether you're bullying them, you're mocking them, you're ridiculing them, you're belittling them, you're considering their honor, as your place, your place of what is the word that I could use? Your the place that you would play on. Okay, the place that you would take as your target, which is whatever is important to them, you're belittling it. So mockery is a type of harm, not all the types of harm.
But
So
إيذاء نفسي.
mockery is one type, hitting is another type, bullying is another type, and certainly, for example, accusing someone of being a liar is another type. Another type is probably taking away someone's power, whether it's confiscating their property, confiscating their money, or whatever it is, or perhaps restricting their rights, etc. So that's a type of إيذاء. Okay.
إيذاء نفسي. It's more than.
I mean, certainly there's the part that is psychological. الاستهزاء is more going to be inflicting pain on the person's psychology by making them lose their confidence. That's the whole tactic. The whole tactic. And you could see, it's quite interesting when you see the ayat and how they would describe the psychology of a disbeliever. Psychology of a disbeliever is always gaslighting. What does that look like? So they would be always gaslighting when it comes to, at least when it comes to dealing with the mu'mineen. So what would they do? You could say, for example, on a political level, look at the think tanks, for example, the way that they were writing their reports and posts and books and all of those recommendations for the politicians. It was just like Cheryl Bernard in Civil Democratic Islam. She was basically setting these tactics in order to manipulate the masses to believe that the Muslims or these people that are holding on to the faith, after she had classified the different Muslim groups into 5 groups, considered that the first group, which basically considered that they could deal with, are basically the secularists. In number 2, we've got basically the traditional Muslims, just random Muslims, don't always know what the religion is saying. And then you've got the more traditional Muslims that know they believe in the religion, they have a good amount of awareness in the religion, but they're willing to import and adapt to the Western culture and include with it some Islam. And then finally got to the fundamentalists, and that's the person that believes that the religion, or at least Islam in this category, okay, that Islam is basically the foundation of justice. Islam is the truth. Islam is what we would consider as the principle that we should follow. And then they gave descriptions that the fundamentalists, they would usually have their focus on Lugha Arabiya. That's not me saying, but that's what she was saying. They would take hijab seriously. They would take the religion seriously and the religious practices seriously, such as fasting. And this is not me saying, this is what she is saying. Okay. But based on that, you could see the tactic later on, the tactic to do this kind of gaslighting. She was talking about, well, that they would have to fund the different groups that are secular groups, and in the media, basically get those stories out and expose. That's what you would say, even if it's not true, but make stories. Maybe some man that was probably having a religious appearance, just had some kind of a misconduct with his daughter, maybe hit his daughter and something happened, make that as the headlines, and that way people can think that every single religious person is basically going to be like this person, simply a person of abuse, a person that is hiding behind principle, appearing like they're people of faith. But the truth of the matter is that these people are nothing but hypocrites and not people of principle. So here goes that thing. It's always shifting. And it's quite interesting. I think I said it yesterday, the day before yesterday. The kuffar, or the hypocrites, they spend more money and more effort in defaming, demonizing the mu'mineen than trying to convince the masses that the wronghood that they are doing is right. Because subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the fitrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the fitrah, the instinct to recognize to a certain extent the right from wrong. And in fact, if we even look at the LGBT movement, for example, the LGBT movement got at its peak of strength when they basically had set laws on those that would engage in any form of what they had considered as lacking inclusivity, or engaging in discrimination against one sexual orientation. This is what they called it. And that's when people were afraid for their paychecks to say anything about what's going on, and that this is not right. How can I deny the fact that this person, hey, he's 6'4" and a big muscle guy, and a person that definitely is looking very masculine, and he wants to identify as a woman, and we would somehow think that, yeah, they even have the right, since they identified as women, then therefore they could join the Olympics and probably on a women's team, etc., and end up really right there winning. And by far, and what we end up seeing is that that type of gaslighting, making you afraid by taking away your confidence to stand up. And al-kuffar play this tactic frequently and often. And that happens a lot on university campuses. That happens a lot on university campuses, and especially that I worked in chaplaincy at St. Catherine University. That was something that I would always see. The professors cornering the students with all these questions. And guess what? Even when the student said, well, I'm not capable of answering these questions, can I bring, talking about me, whether she can bring me to answer these questions? But most of the times, professors don't want that. Why? Because the object was not to find answers to the questions. The object was more of a psychological tactic to let that Muslim feel that they are the place of mockery, they've got no honor, etc. So they're not looking for answers as much as wanting to get to that tactic to let that Muslim feel cornered, humiliated. So just put that within perspective, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us the psychology of the kafir gaslighting, their toxic behavior, and certainly a lot of it comes from that narcissist kafir right there. Okay, so now redirecting, it's the same exact tactic that you would see. Okay, that narcissist type of thing, and of course making you feel that you're the one that's a terrorist, you're the one that's backwards, you're the one that and of course what happens is that many Muslims are afraid to probably show up in their Islam. So in order to somehow appear a moderate Muslim, she would wear, for example, probably a skirt and make it very colorful, and probably the hijab, put it halfway in her head, on her head, probably add some ornaments, etc., some makeup, just to appear moderate. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't get sucked in that. ولن ترضى عنك اليهود ولا النصارى حتى تتبع ملتهم. Just know the Christians, the Jews, and all those kuffar, they will never be content until you give up on your faith. So don't get drawn into this type of gaslighting, thinking that by giving up on your Islam, that somehow you're going to be appearing as more inclusive, more acceptable, more moderate, more at least liberal, more smarter, whatever it is. They're not going to be content. So be careful from this toxic and a narcissist psychology of the disbelievers and making you feel that, hey, you're guilty. And of course, many Muslims, they're working so hard. It's like, just, hey, just please get me out of that classification. I saw that on university campuses often. Saw that all the time. Believe it or not, the ones to stand against me were always the Muslims, unfortunately. So if we're, for example, in a meeting, okay, if we're in a meeting and I'm bringing up Muslim rights and that Muslims should be included, that Muslims should be understood, and that etc., and bring awareness, and they have the right to get tabling, they have the right to have bidets or whatever it is in the bathrooms to do wudu, etc., just trying to advocate for Muslim rights. The first one that would, unfortunately, this is so sad to admit, that the first ones to object to what I'm saying would be Muslims, or at least a history of Muslims. They would be, well, so maybe we should teach the Muslims how to be inclusive with the LGBT. Maybe we should teach the Muslims, what are you doing to be inclusive with the LGBT? And then they would just want to expose the Muslims in order, and this is what they're doing it for. They're trying to show the disbelievers that, see, we're actually on your side. Because, of course, especially in America, for example, if you're in a Western country, what's happening? Well, they're the ones that are the people that have the money. They're the ones that are hiring. They're let's say, the ones that are up there in that administration. And of course, some Muslims, they just want to appear as supporters, as the best supporters, as the ones to basically be the keys to advance at least the kuffar's agenda. So they want to show that, hey, we're just the right people for your advancement. And this is so common. This is so common that certain people, they just want to show, and others, they would bring this face, especially when no Muslims are present. When Muslims are not present, they're just always behind the Muslims, mocking the Muslims, mocking Islam, etc. That's basically istihza. That's that game. This is a sign of nifaq. And even politically, we see that all the time. Even politically, we would see groups basically speaking about peace and speaking about justice. But of course, when it's presented as peace and justice as if it's a neutral thing, and when we're speaking about, of course, human rights and all of that, when they're wanting to talk about Zionism and all of that, it's like, well, who's not talking about human rights, but who's being targeted here? How many Jews are being targeted? How many, and they'll be talking about in support of anti-Semitism. Well, whoever said that Muslims were not Semitic? Whoever said that the Palestinians are not Semitic? But it's all in order to somehow say we are more patriotic to your kufr than yourself. That's what's happening. We're seeing that often. And this is definitely a sign of nifaq. A sign of nifaq. Okay.
جزاك الله خيرا. By
Yeah.
the way, you are right. من عاد لي وليا ليس من آذى لي وليا. I'm wrong.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Okay. جزاك الله. زادك الله.
ألم يروا كم أهلكنا من قبلهم من قرن مكناهم في الأرض ما لم نمكن لكم وأرسلنا السماء عليهم مدرارا وجعلنا الأنهار تجري من تحتهم فأهلكناهم بذنوبهم وأنشأنا من بعدهم قرنا آخرين. So are they not saying the different, we talked about the qarn, whether it's the generation or whether it's a century, or whether, in other words, we're speaking about, are we talking about the chronology here? Are we talking about a generation? Are we talking about a certain group of people? Are we talking about cities? What really are we talking about? And all of that would also be included within the word al-qarn. So whether we're speaking about a particular city, for example, maybe we're talking about maybe the city that was owned by the pharaohs in Egypt, or whether we're talking about the pharaohs, which basically is a dynasty that controlled that area, or whether we're speaking about a specific century, or maybe a set of thousands of years, probably that controlled the area in Egypt or whatever it is, and the list goes on and on. So it really means the same thing. It depends on which angle you're looking at it from, and from which angle you're basically scrutinizing it from. And مكناهم في الأرض, and we said مكناهم, التمكين generally is to give authority. We talked about that, but when we're speaking about giving authority, we're actually talking about that the person is given authority by giving them the keys to get the authority. That's a tamkeen. Whether tamkeen is to get the keys to get authority, we're speaking about knowledge, or perhaps knowing how to control the different systems like engineering or probably science or whatever it is, that would be a tamkeen. And fil ard, and we talked about in details, ما لم نمكن لكم at the end. So a couple of things to talk about in this ayah. أرسلنا السماء عليهم مدرارا. So did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them the provisions? I mean, why did they give this privilege? Why did they get this privilege and actually actually use it for the wrong thing? So why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevent them from such privileges? And perhaps they'll turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so a number of different reasons. Number one is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may, as in other ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who, there's one thing, is that you can have someone get provisions. Think of it as a farmer. Okay, so the farmer is basically given the ability to, let's say, crop. And of course, certainly, if they take in probably the different agricultural maybe tips, and perhaps even have the resources, maybe the best soil, perhaps the most fertile soil, of course, and perhaps good amount of water. And that was basically studied and with, special equipment to make sure that we're getting the best harvest, etc. Will that give you the best harvest? Certainly. It will give you the best results. Okay, so whatever you invest, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made this world basically function in a certain number, in a certain way, in a certain system, and therefore you understand the system is going to give you more and more. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talked about the man, that basically was debating with that man, telling him about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why would he deny, etc. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said about the earth, he said وَلَمْ تَظْلِمْ مِنْهُ شَيْئًا, that the earth itself did not abuse him. Wait a minute, how did the earth is going to abuse? Yeah, there's a special duty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the water, the earth. You do a certain investment in it, and it would give you what you invested in it. That's the responsibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the earth. If my servants invest in you, then this is what I want you to give back. وَلَمْ تَظْلِمْ, referring to the earth. وَلَمْ تَظْلِمْ مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. Okay, and that's the same thing. The amount of investment that you put in, perhaps on earth, or perhaps in doing whatever, choosing probably the right space, the right place, etc., all of that is going to be part of what brings success to you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَرْسَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْهِمْ مِدْرَارًا, that he had sent the skies pouring with water. And why didn't he just block it, since they were not doing the right thing? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that, well, they were given tamkeen. They were given tamkeen, they were given the resources, they were given the tools, they were using also those tools in order to be in power, in order to get the advancement, in order to probably get maybe an increase in lifespan, maybe better in health, perhaps maybe get more resources, etc. That's all tamkeen. Okay. Along with this tamkeen, who was giving this to them? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created the world, and he had decreed that if somebody understands the tools for tamkeen, the tools for empowerment, how to get to successes, that the earth is going to basically give them in return. Not only is the earth going to give them something in return, but the skies too, they're going to give them something in return. Now, the earth and the skies, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed and created them to function in a certain way, to give in return as long as you're putting in the effort. But at one point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if this person continues to show disbelief, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that there's a point where the earth itself, or the skies, or probably the rain, or the things in nature, they will retaliate and even destruct those that had basically went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would be the ones to destruct. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Fir'aun. فَمَا بَكَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّمَاء. The skies didn't cry over them. So the skies actually cry over somebody? How does that even happen? It's just to let us know that The earth itself recognizes who's walking on it. The skies, they would see and oversee who's actually there walking. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that the things they can seem mute, they can appear as emotionless, but the things around you are not emotionless. They're not emotionless, and in fact, they recognize who's there. They recognize what you're doing. At the end, for those that are putting in that tamkeen, using the resources, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them السماء عليهم مدرارا, will give them الأنهار تجري من تحتهم. But once their dhunub kick in, once their sins kick in, then expect a complete change. Expect everything to be flipped on that person. And that's why the flipping was this nation, this qarn, this generation was basically flipped. أنشأنا من بعدهم قرنا آخرين. So what happened? They were flipped. Flipped where? Well, flipped meaning all that tamkeen that they had put in, all the power that they had invested is now nothing but history. So what happened? Well, another history, قرنا آخرين, another nation, another group of people were basically created. ولو نزلنا عليك كتابا في قرطاس فلمسوه بأيديهم لقال الذين كفروا إن هذا إلا سحر مبين وقالوا لولا أنزل عليه ملك ولو أنزلنا ملكا لقضي الأمر ثم لا ينظرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if we had revealed a book in a printed manuscript, and they would have probably touched it with their own bare hands, the disbelievers would come up to say, this is clear and apparent magic. وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْهِ مَلَكٌ. And they said, if only what had been sent to him was an angel, and if it was an angel that was sent to them, لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ, then everything would have been, hey, this is the end of it. ثُمَّ لَا يُنظَرُونَ. A couple things to say here. When it says وَلَوْ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ كِتَابًا فِي قِرْطَاسٍ فَلَمَسُوهُ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, what does that look like? So we're looking at, they would see that there is a book that is revealed similar to the Quran, and they could see that it's being sent down. And لَمَسُوهُ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, it goes down and they're capable of touching it, and they saw that this is the same book that you had seen come down from up there. فَلَمَسُوهُ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, they would touch it. In other words, there's no denial because now you could touch it. Now you have, let's say, a hands-on and to recognize what you had seen. لَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. But still, the disbelievers would still find a way to create a narrative, and in order to basically choose disbelief over belief. But I want you to look at this one. What would they say? إن هذا إلا سحر مبين. They would just say that this is mere magic. Well, what is magic? If the disbelievers are going to say mere magic, does that mean magic is real, or how do we understand the context of this? So, لَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, this is what they would claim, but this is to, in Lugha Arabiya, we have, or in English as well, sometimes, yes, we would say this is what they would say, and there is sometimes that this is what their body, lisanul hal and lisanul maqal. Okay, lisanul hal is basically what, looking at the person, what it would appear that they are saying. You see a person coming in, probably running, they would close the door really quick, and you're like, what's wrong? Why did you ask what's wrong? And not perhaps something like, hey, you want some cake? You said what's wrong. Why? Because you recognize that the person coming in was actually looking afraid, looking, they were running, they closed the door really quick. The behavior is speaking of a person running away from danger, afraid, etc. You're not saying, hey, you want some cake? You're like, what's wrong? In other words, can I help you? That's what I'm trying to tell you. Well, لقال الذين كفروا. Now this is لسان المقال. لسان المقال is when a person literally says something. Literally, this is what they would be saying. إن هذا إلا سحر مبين. This is mere magic. Why magic? Because they recognize there's something rather supernatural about it. But in order to give themselves the justification on or for why they don't want to embrace it as the truth, they would give it a narrative that it's coming from an ill motive. Here's another method of gaslighting. All right, here's another method of gaslighting. So what would that be? Well, this is sihr mubin. Now, a lot of Muslims, when they're being accused, they basically fall for this gaslighting and they end up wanting to be in defense every single time. Okay? But I want you to look at these ayat. They're basically exposing the gaslighting that the disbelievers are falling in. It's like, this is what you're going to say, but don't think that we're going to fall for whatever you are trying to somehow accuse us of and think that we're just going to be spending hours and hours trying to prove to you that this isn't magic. When they would recognize, just by the word magic, you just called it supernatural. You just called it supernatural right there. But you wanted to claim that it was coming from an ill motive, or at least that it wasn't divine, but it was related to demons, it was related to something satanic, and it was related to something evil. But certainly, they did recognize there's something supernatural, but they wanted to accuse it of containing nothing but evil and that it was not for a good principle. وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْهِ مَلَكٌ. And then they would go for a different one. So the first time, they basically said, well, hey, can we have something that we could touch, etc., even if it's a book, it's anything like that? No. Now the ayah continues, and وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْهِ مَلَكٌ. They had said, if only an angel had come to him. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, and for this one, he didn't respond when they had said, in hada illa sahrun mubin, because in itself, the sentence in itself contains how they're gaslighting. But in this ayah, it does respond. وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْهِ مَلَكٌ. And they said, if only there was an angel that was sent down. وَلَوْ أَنزَلْنَا مَلَكًا لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. If we would have sent an angel, لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. What is لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ? Two things. لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ to mean, well, things would have then not required any effort to believe, any effort to see and basically get tested, because, hey, that means it's to you right there. Now we got no reason to be tested because there you have it. You just saw the angel before your eyes. Other scholars said, no, لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ is not that, but is... Second. Laptop is telling me I'm going to turn off. Okay, we're safe. لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. They said لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ because the angels would come down for a couple reasons. Number one, you got some angels that would have a special task to do, whether it's to give the soul and blow the soul in a person when they would be in their mother's womb after 120 days of pregnancy, or whether it is to give the different arzaq, to distribute it, etc., or whether it's to be there when people are doing dhikr, etc., okay, or whether it's munkar wa nakir, writing down your actions on the left and on the right. We know that one since we were kids. All right, all of those different angels, they would have a certain task. But the task of malaika that were sent down to, one, speak to the prophets. In other words, we're speaking about correspondence, if you may, between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the prophets. In other words, they were correspondents. Now, these group of angels, their duty is different than giving and providing services for the people and making sure that that area, whether it's in life, death, provisions, whatever it is, that that area is basically done. There are certain malaika, their duty is as correspondents with the anbiya, or correspondence, basically to deliver a certain message to the anbiya, and certainly directed at the disbelievers. Now, those malaika would only come as, just like Jibreel alayhi salam, he is the mightiest angel. Okay. Number two, the malaika, they would not handle disbelief. So, لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ, they would only come in order to destruct a certain nation, because they would not be capable of handling any disbelief. They were created in their, if we can call it an instinct, but it's really their nature. Their nature is not to handle disbelief. Okay? At least we're speaking about, okay, so what do they do? So when you look at those incidents that the angels had come down, okay, whether it's during the time of Qawm Lut, or whether it's the angel coming to the Prophet ﷺ telling him, if you want, I can just let those two mountains collapse over the people of Ta'if. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no. You look at, for example, the angels during the time of Prophet Nuh, during the time of Prophet Musa, etc. It was to give and use power of the Lord Almighty right there to either destruct or give support to the prophets. Okay, so when we say la qudiya al-amr, that means that if the angels, once the angels would come down, because you wanted the angels to come down, they're just going to be coming down for just one thing: to bring an end to you. That's the second interpretation. ثُمَّ لَا يُنظَرُونَ, and there would be no wait. Meaning what? They're not going to sit there and just, somehow just wait for you, because ثُمَّ لَا يُنظَرُونَ, there's no waiting. Because you had basically decided that you wanted the angels to come, and what that would mean, you're expediting the process to get to your fate. That's what it would mean. Other scholars had said, وَلَوْ أَنزَلْنَا مَلَكًا, just like continuing this ayah, وَلَوْ جَعَلْنَاهُ مَلَكًا لَجَعَلْنَاهُ رَجُلًا وَلَلَبَسْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَا يَلْبِسُونَ. If we would have wanted to make the angel come down, even if it was in an appearance of a man, لَجَعَلْنَاهُ رَجُلًا, we would have made this angel come in the shape of a human being. And we know in the shape of a human being, we know in Surah al-Dhariyat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, when the angels came in, and then فَأَوْجَسَ مِنْهُمْ خِيفَةً قَالَ أَلَا تَأْكُلُونَ. What happened? He was afraid. فَأَوْجَسَ مِنْهُمْ خِيفَةً قَالَ أَلَا تَأْكُلُونَ قَالُوا إِنَّا رُسُلُ رَبِّكَ. They responded, we're basically the correspondence We're the messengers coming from your Lord Almighty. We're here not to get any hospitality from you. We're here on a mission. In what shape? Why did Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam not know that this was an angel? He didn't know because they were coming in a form of a human being. And we know that whether it's Prophet Ibrahim or other or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, Dihya al-Kalbi basically Dihya al-Kalbi, Jibreel alayhi salam would come in his image, and Sayyidah Aisha used to think that that was Dihya al-Kalbi, but later discovered that, oh, that was actually Jibreel alayhi salam. Okay, and he would come in a human form. So just keeping that one in mind, that لَجَعَلْنَاهُ رَجُلًا, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have made his appearance be the human appearance. But why? Why make it a human appearance? Why not an angel appearance? We would usually think of an angel based on what I guess Leonardo da Vinci, or then in the image that St. Petersburg and the Vatican and all of those having a human image with these wings and probably wearing Peter Pan shoes or whatever it is. Okay, but when we look at the angels in the ahadith, they don't actually look like that. They don't look like that, and it's a completely different appearance. Okay, and if the malaika were to come down in the image that that they were created in, people would be extremely afraid. And then they would say, well, we can't believe in this because this is too scary, because they cannot relate to the malaika or these creatures that look different. And certainly it would be something beyond their practice, because what an angel can do is completely different than what you can do. And then create this narrative, well, he's an angel, he's not like us, so we can't be asked to do what an angel can do because we're different. We're of a different nature. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَلَبَسْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَا يَلْبِسُونَ. At the end, if this was going to be an angel in a shape of a human being, then it would have actually made things even more confusing, because it would be nothing but confusing to them, because this angel would not be eating, not be drinking, and certainly would not be doing human practices. And even if it's an angel, let's say, transferred into a human being, they still would have the angel features, the angel nature. And that's why فَقَرَّبَهُ إِلَيْهِمْ قَالَ أَلَا تَأْكُلُونَ. They said, oh, we can't eat. We don't engage in that. That's not how our nature functions. Same thing. Can you reproduce? Well, that's not how our nature functions. So when you look at the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't send an angel to be the one to deliver the message, was number one, that was going to be لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ. لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ, that was going to be bringing in the final decree. That's it. The angels are going to come as the last and the final statement, and making the final statement. The angels that were sent down to give you that introduction, to give you the help, to give you basically the message, those were the angels that wanted to basically have a specific job. But if the angels were to come down as a final thing, that would basically be expediting لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ. All right.
Did they mention what kind of angel? Angel of death, angel of
well, anyways, the Arab didn't believe in angels as basically doing
duties.
the duties that we would think of, they considered that the angels were nothing but banatullah, nothing but
Right.
the harems that worked for Allah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question on ayah 7 and ayah 8. If you can go back, please. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. Here at the beginning of ayah 7, he said, وَلَوْ نَزَّلْنَا. And down in ayah 8, وَلَوْ أَنزَلْنَا. Any difference between its language, or it's like any difference of meaning between
Okay.
ولو نزلنا ولو أنزلنا? Why not both of them نزلنا or both of them أنزلنا?
Okay, so nazzalna, it would be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's sending down, and certainly both would mean the same thing. But وَلَوْ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ كِتَابًا فِي قِرْطَاسٍ, if we had set down this book basically in this qirtas, in that tanzil right there, but al-alif itself is to include whenever you would have it in the verb, it would be in لغة عربية, it would be that there is this effort that is induced in it. So ولو أنزلنا ملكا, because there would be an effort induced in it, and this effort that is induced,
What
that would
induced, please? What induced?
Induced meaning that it is put in it, that it is put in it, and certainly that's not what just
It's
in
not
its
the original.
because when you say نزل, مسك الكتاب ونزل.
No.
But أنزل, it would be to put an effort to make something happen, even though it's out of its nature.
Because these kuffar, they said at the beginning of ayah 8, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ. Then he answered, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَوْ أَنزَلْنَا. The same.
Right. So we're talking about inducing something.
Induced.
So they wanted they wanted something to be induced. They too recognized that that's not the natural nature of something if it's a different creature. So they wanted something to be induced within that creature to do something different.
Induced. Okay. Oh, Jazakallah khair.
And you know, there's some details in Lugha Arabiya for al-hamza, like just like we would say indafa'a. Hamza, it's basically زيادة في المعاني زيادة في المعاني. It's هي من أجل إنه إظهار بأنه في هناك قوة وضعت على هذا الفعل. That's what it means to induce.
دخلت عليه.
دخلت عليه.
جزاك الله خير.
وإياكم. ولو جعلناه ملكا ولقد استهزئ برسل من قبلك. Okay, you know, one thing that was quite interesting, when we say أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله, why don't we say أؤمن أن لا إله إلا الله? Why say أشهد? Why not أؤمن أن لا إله إلا الله? Why أشهد? And that one, you know, I was looking into it. And Ibn Taymiyyah has a great answer for that. Even though in general, okay, if someone says that they believe in Islam, they said, I believe in Islam and I believe it's the truth, and they didn't do their shahada, is that considered a testimony of faith? Opinion one, yes. That's the first opinion. They said yes. Why? They said because there's an event when Khalid ibn al-Walid, he went to one of the battles, and the people there, when Khalid ibn al-Walid wanted to wage the war, they said sabatna. What is the word sabatna? Sabatna means that they had become Zoroastrians or Magians. wait a minute. So they didn't say that they had become Muslims. They said saba'na. They said that they had just embraced a different faith. So why should that relate to us at all? Because there was the stereotypical image that Islam is another branch of Zoroastrianism or the Magian faith. So because there was this notion that Islam it's another branch or another denomination of that faith, the Prophet ﷺ, of course, regarded that what these people had said was based on that stereotypical image, but it would still be included as if they had done their shahada. How? Even though they said a completely different word. Because they just didn't say the right word, but the meaning and what it carries, by looking at the context, they actually wanted to say that they belong to this faith that, of course, the media is talking about. They wanted to say we belong to this faith. We're part of it. And the Prophet ﷺ, when Khalid ibn al-Walid had said, giving himself the justification why he's still engaged in that war, he said they just said that out of fear, not out of faith. But the Prophet ﷺ said, هَلَّا شَقَقْتَ عَنْ قَلْبِهِ. Did you rip up their hearts to actually see what they really believe in? The answer is no. And then Khalid ibn Walid asked the question. He said, well, if I really opened up their hearts, am I going to find faith in there? He's at that moment, am I going to find faith if I really opened up their hearts? He said, no. Because faith is a different thing. It's on the inside. And when you look at لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ, when we say آمَنَّا, yes, it's on the inside. Faith is on the inside. But الشهادة is to actually say, I believe it to the point that I'm witnessing this mentally. I'm witnessing this as if it is an actual vision that I could see. I'm believing in it internally. So when you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, it is to actually put a testimony that is even stronger than أؤمن بأنه لا إله إلا الله. Because if you were to say u'min, that's just on the inside. I've got that faith on the inside. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that no, say ashhadu, because you're saying that your heart believes, that your eye, there's that, remember that visual piece of it, that I could see it like I could see things with my own eyes, and that mentally is shahada, there's shahadat al-ayn, there's shahadat al-ayn, like the shahada that you would actually see, and there's the shahada that you would basically believe in something. You recognize something. That's the shahada of recognition, the witness of recognition. So what are we doing when we're saying ashhadu an la ilaha illallah? We're making that testimony right there in its strongest terms, that I am in my heart, deep in my heart, I believe. And I'm on my tongue, I am announcing it in the boldest words. And I am basically right there declaring that I could see the truth the way that I would see it in my eyes. And I would basically say my eyes could, my mind is capable of recognizing it in its apparent right. It's basically a level of yaqeen. It's a level of yaqeen. So
the same, like the blind, same like us. We don't see, but we nashhadu.
absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. Because shahada Because shahada is not, when we speak about shahadat al-ayn, it doesn't have to be literally the eyes. And فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what is really blinded is not the eyes, but it's actually the hearts. The hearts are the ones that are blind from seeing the truth. وَلَقَدْ اسْتُهْزِئَ بِرُسُلٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ. Now look at this one. Here comes al-istihza again in talking about the mockery again. Why bring up that word again? Let's see. وَلَقَدْ اسْتُهْزِئَ بِرُسُلٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ فَحَاقَ بِالَّذِينَ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ مَا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. The prophets before you, they were also mocked. فَحَاقَ بِالَّذِينَ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ. And it was basically coming at them, snapping at them. It was surrounding them. This is al-ihaqa. سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ. Those that had mocked the prophets, and what they had mocked basically was surrounding them. What does it mean that they were surrounded? But wait a minute. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even say that? I want you to look at this one. That certainly the disbelievers were engaging in certain things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to basically right there give the psychological support to the believers by telling them, you remember, there are nations that were destructed. In other words, hang in there, okay? And make sure you engage in this argument. Let's put that right there. So this is what they're engaging in. And you could see it's affecting the believers mentally, okay? It's affecting not only the believers, but it's affecting the prophets mentally, that they're being mocked. But the impact on a believer is different than the impact on a prophet. Okay, why? Because the impact on a believer, it can sometimes harm their faith. They can lose confidence in their faith as a result of such mockery. But the prophets and the messengers, they never lose faith as a result of such mockery. But the prophets and messengers, they can get into anxiety as a result of their disbelief and their recognition that, but it is the truth. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى أَثَارِهِمْ إِن لَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. You're putting yours, لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. You're just hurting yourself too much. You're basically getting yourself into this anxiety. At the end, وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ. You have to understand that the prophets and the messengers, their duty is just to deliver the message. So for the mu'mineen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting them know as this, let's say, consolidating them, giving them the support, said, well, there are different nations. They basically lived in this, in this type of, different nations, they were living in this type of disbelief, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically the one, after all of that they had done, أهلكناهم بذنوبهم. They were destructed in what they were doing. What kind of dhunub were they committing? Whether it's one, al-istihza, or whether that was denying the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dealt with them. So therefore, أنشأنا من بعدهم قرنا آخرين. Then other nations were created. But when it came to the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to give the Prophet ﷺ a different kind of a support. And it said, وَلَقَدْ اسْتُهْزِئَ بِرُسُلٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ. What happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directing the words at Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and telling him, there were many prophets before you. They were mocked. In other words, you hang in there. I want you to be strong. Don't let that mockery not alternate the faith, because that would be something that a believer can probably fall into, but never will a prophet fall into that. But the prophet may fall in anxiety. It can happen that they can go through anxiety. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was teaching the Prophet ﷺ There are certain things that get into anxiety. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. خلاص. Yeah, there's not much that you could do except deliver the message. فَحَاقَ بِالَّذِينَ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ. Now here's one thing. When you look at the words فَحَاقَ, it's actually a very key word here. When a person is gaslighting, what happens? The victim, they end up feeling that they have to be in defense mode. Why? Because what a gaslighter would do, they would put an accusation. So you would point out, for example, the wrong thing that this person's doing. So then they would throw at you a bigger accusation, and then you start feeling you need to defend yourself. But what they did was throw something big, even though they know that that's not who you are, even though they know that that's not the what's happening, but they would make up a lie so that you can be shifted from being in an attack mode to being in a defense mode. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word fahaqa, because it can happen that the Prophet himself, he basically was mocked at, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's a human being. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, the prophets before you, they went through this. But here's what happens. فَحَاقَ بِالَّذِينَ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ. When a gaslighter uses that tactic, it's in order to drain you of your energy, and then they would consider themselves as the victorious. Why? Because instead of you scrutinizing their harm, you would end up trying to spend all the energy to defend yourself from that accusation that they had thrown at you. And then you get sucked in, thinking that, oh no, it's a misunderstanding. But you as an innocent person, you basically would be wanting to somehow do and put in all the effort that you can probably have in investing, that, no, I don't mean harm. No, I don't mean to say it this way. No, you misunderstood me. And that other person is looking at you as right now coming in to say, I'm sorry. They shifted you from basically coming in to announce that you're a victim of their abuse to right now you committing and appearing and basically coming in right there to right now say, I'm sorry. Now you're coming in to go and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it this way. No, and now they're basically abusing your innocence. Now, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَحَاقَ بِالَّذِينَ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ. What is it? What does it mean, fahaqa? Fahaqa is to surround, is to empty. So when you're looking at this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ, don't drain yourself, don't get sucked in trying to let them play that tactic on you. You continue delivering the message and don't get sucked in trying to defend yourself, because you have to speak in the position of honor, in the position of power, not from the position of defense. Because if you come in with a position of defense, they're going to continue, because that tactic worked on you, to drain your effort. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَحَاقَ بِالَّذِينَ سَخِرُوا مِنْهُمْ مَا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. What was the tactic? The tactic is let them continue their mockery. Don't show them that that's affecting you in any way, and let that drain them instead. Sahih, ما كانوا به يستهزئون. What's going to happen? Whatever they're going to mock you in, let that drain them, not drain you. Number 2, you be strong. Number 3, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what they had mocked in, that's what snapped at them. Snapped at them for what? ما كانوا به يستهزئون. Whatever istihza, whatever mockery they put in, well, that's what came to them, snapped at them, and basically drained them eventually. And eventually, that's what became the place of destruction for them. So how do we know that? قل سيروا في الأرض ثم انظروا كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين. You're doubting that. Telling the disbelievers, because a prophet would never be in doubt in that. So tell them, go and siru fil ard. Go and walk and navigate on earth and see how the ending, the decree of the nations that had denied the truth, what happened to them. So how do I deal with their gaslighting? Qul, stand up and actually tell them, you be the person in power. And that's why it said qul, qul, qul. I want you to say it. I want you to speak in power. I want you to speak in strength. Don't at all show them that somehow you are going to be in defense mode. No, come up and stand up high and make sure that you speak in power and say, I want you to go and look at the nations. You study the nations yourself. You're not going to be running and getting away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grasp and grip. There's no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the complete grip, and that's what il-haqa means. Haqa means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all the grip and there's no running away. There's no running away, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, قُلْ لِمَنْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Speak with the complete pride and tell them, who's the one that owns the heavens and the earth? Again, qul, look at this one. Say and say and say. What are you doing? You're flipping that gaslighting tactic on them now, and you are coming to speak in power. You are coming to speak in complete confidence and telling them, qul. Now you ask them, now you corner them instead of them coming to somehow come at you and make you lose your confidence. Now you're asking them. Flip the questions at them and say, قُلْ لِمَنْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Ask them, who to the heavens and the earth, who do they belong to? But then they might actually give you a different answer. But قُلْ, say, it's basically for Allah. And then كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. Now, when you're doing that da'wah, remember, you want to include 2 things. You want to include letting the people know that the door of mercy is always open. The door of mercy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is open, but not for long. كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed mercy on himself. Well, be careful. لَيَجْمَعَنَّكُمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. For sure. This is that noon tawqeed. For sure, the Lord Almighty is going to gather you on a judgment day. On a day, it's a long-standing, on a judgment day, there's no doubt in it. In other words, if they're living that doubt, just let them know there's no doubt. This is inevitable. There's no doubt. And there's one thing that they need to do. Those that had lost themselves, what does it mean that they had lost themselves? They were given the privilege to take this test. They were given the privilege to live this dunya. They were given the privilege to get a lot of those resources. Those are the people that were in real loss. فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. So how do we understand all of this? Hey, we were talking about the things that were in orbit, the things that were in motion, whether it's the motion itself and real motion in the heavens and the earth, or whether it's in different stages of evolution or development or whatever you want to use in the word. in changes and the creation itself. And if you thought that only the things in motion belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells us, وَلَهُ مَا سَكَنَ فِي اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. Even the things that are in no motion, or the things that are in complete calmness, in complete tranquility, even those throughout the night and throughout the day, they would be his part and belonging to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's all hearing and all knowing. What is that to tell us? That's basically to tell us right there that, having that sukoon, having that tranquility, having that moment when one is just in a state of calmness, they would basically be له ما سكن في الليل والنهار, and they would be basically in complete obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whether it's in motion, doing the orbiting and all of that, basically doing their way of ubudiyya, their way of submission, or whether it's something that is appearing to you as not in motion, everything will basically be one, whether it's in motion, or whether there's a sound to it, and the energy that probably comes with dhulumat and nur, and the energy that comes in, or whether it is something that you don't recognize the energy. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this world and makes this world be from something that is so vibrant during the day to making it at night be as if there was no life? No one's there. What happened? Everyone was put to sleep. And that's in order to say what? Just like لا يجمعنكم إلى يوم القيامة. Just like on Judgment Day, you will be gathered. Just like right now, dunya, there's this movement, there's this life, there's going to be a day, well, second, it's going to be a day when everything is going to die. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is then, just like he was capable of making what is vibrant during the day become like dead during the night. And just like he's capable of transforming a city and a place from being full of life to being dead, that's the same thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of making everything that is of a living thing become what is sakana fil layli wan nahar, what is calm, what is in a state of energyless throughout the night and throughout the day. I'll end right here for today, inshallah. I know it was...
Ya Allah, that was amazing.
MashaAllah,
MashaAllah.
we still didn't get to Tafseer al-Qurtubi, but there's really a lot to say still. الإضاد. Sorry, what was the question, dear? I'm hearing someone say something about...
No, sorry, that was
Okay.
yeah.
All right, fair enough. That's okay. So what we'll do, inshallah, I really wanted to do the dua. If you guys want us to do Hisn al-Muslim, I'd be happy to do it. If you feel that
No, we have to.
you have to? Okay, I'm cool. So what we'll do, let me just give you a 2-minute break and then come back, inshallah. Okay?
Can we finish this class with the dua? I send in the chat something for my friend. She has tomorrow surgery. If you can make dua for her, and she was with us from the hospital.
Ya
she
Allah.
attended the class, but
What's her name?
She looked tired.
What's her name?
Huda. Yeah.
Well, we could say Allahumma anta shafi la shifaa illa shifaa'uk. Ishfi huda shifaan la yughadiru saqama.
And Suzanne كمان.
And Suzanne, Allahumma rabban nas, adhhib al-ba's واشفهما أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاؤك اشفهما شفاء لا يغادر سقما. اللهم
آمين
رب الناس أذهب البأس واشفهما سوزان
آمين
هدى.
وهدى
آمين
اشفهما
آمين
شفاء لا يغادر سقما. اللهم رب
آمين
الناس
آمين
أذهب البأس واشفهما أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاؤك اشفهما شفاء لا
آمين
يغادر سقما.
And she has surgery tomorrow. Inshallah, make it
Surgery?
easy, Ya Rabbi.
May Allah
Surgery.
subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy.
آمين